This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
At least 7 people killed in Tanzania floods. Tunisia's media mogul Karoui released from prison ahead of October 13th poll. And Global Fund meeting in France hopes to raise $14 billion to help fight global epidemics. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. Top Chinese and U.S. trade officials meet in Washington for more negotiations on their 15-month trade war. And in sports, Italy, eliminated after their Saturday Rugby World Cup game against New Zealand, is cancelled over Typhoon Hagibis. Well, at least 7 people have been killed and hundreds displaced following flooding in northeastern Tanzania. Authorities say they have evacuated residents to safe areas after the district of Korogwe was hit by torrential rains. Parts of Tanzania have witnessed heavy rainfall this year, causing massive flooding intermittently over the last few months. Well, we'll now move on to the presidential elections in Tunisia. A Tunisia appeals court has freed presidential candidate Nabil Karoui from prison. This comes just days before the second round presidential runoff set for Sunday. Karoui was detained in August, shortly before Tunisia's election, on suspicion of money laundering and fraud. CGTN's Adnan Shiwashi has more details for us.
The presidential candidate left Al-Mornagia prison and greeted his supporters, who gathered at his campaign headquarters. The Qalb Tunis, Heart of Tunisia party, which was formed only months ago by Nabil Karoui, has reiterated its call for the postponement by a week of the presidential runoff election scheduled for Sunday.
The decision to release Karoui is a positive step after a unanimous demand for his release to guarantee a free and transparent electoral process. Election day should be postponed because 2 days are not enough for campaigning.
The election authority reacted immediately. The EZ president declared that it will not postpone the second round of the presidential election.
The electoral process is irreversible. It's governed by constitutional deadlines. The election campaign for the second round of the early presidential election began on Thursday, October 3rd, and ends on October 11th. Tunisians will elect a new president on Sunday the 13th.
Another movement had previously called for the release of Al-Karoui. However, the Islamic Party has refused to work with whom it describes as corrupt individuals.
We will not form the government with people who are accused of corruption and money laundering. We want to govern with a coalition of parties. We only accept those who will fight corruption.
Qais Said and Nabil Karoui came first and second, respectively, in the first round of the presidential race. The election authority has called on Tunisians to vote en masse on Sunday to save the electoral process.
Tunisian presidential candidate Nabil Karoui has spent the entire presidential campaign in a prison cell, but still managed to galvanize his supporters and to come second in the first round, and now faces a runoff with independent candidate and constitutional law expert Qais Said on October the 13th. Adnan Shiwashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Meanwhile, preliminary results have shown that Tunisia's Ennahda Islamic movement has come out on top in legislative polls, winning 52 of the 217 seats, but falling short of the majority required to form a government. The recently formed Qaib Town's party of presidential candidate Nabil Karoui is in second place with 38 seats. CGTN's Adnan Shiwashi is following the Tunisian elections and has more on this development.
The announcement was made after completion of vote counting in the 33 constituencies, an examination of reports on irregularities registered during the ballot day.
The Council of the Election Authority reviewed the impacts of violations on the election process, particularly the distribution of seats in Parliament in accordance with the regulations of Article 143 of the Election Law, which allows the cancellation, even partially, of lists.
Many African, European and Tunisian observation missions underscored that the election process in Tunisia, which has been closely monitored over the past few weeks, was well administered.
The whole parliamentary election process was transparent. However, the election law should be revised to control political advertising. The list of registered voters should also be made available to the civil society.
217 MPs from 9 parties as well as independents who form the parliament will have 2 months to agree on the formation of a new government. Analysts say the main ruling parties could face deadlock, as in 2011 and 2014, the winning Ennahda party needs to form a coalition to form a government.
For weeks, all parties have campaigned against each other. Now they have to sit at the negotiating table to form the government. Many concessions will be made and new alliances will emerge. Now all the slogans of the campaigns will disappear in favor of a more resilient talk. All scenarios are possible.
Another Islamic movement needs the support of the secular Al-Tayyar party with 22 seats, the Conservative Dignity Coalition with 21 MPs, as well as the backing of 14 MPs from the Premier's Tahya Tunis party, in order to reach a majority of 109 MPs who will vote in favor of the new government.
Following the official announcement of the preliminary results by the election authority, Tunisia's parliament looks deeply fractured. Therefore, the coming period of government formation will likely prove hard and long. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, we're staying with Tunisia with Dr. Zayed Akil, who's political analyst and researcher at the Ahram Center for Security and Strategic Studies in Cairo, who now joins us to discuss the outcome and impact of Tunisia's parliamentary election, as well as the release of presidential candidate Nabil Karoui. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Akil. I'm going to jump right into it. Does the moderate Islamist Ennahda win in Tunisia's parliamentary election underscore dissatisfaction with the major parties in Tunisia?
I think that the parliamentary elections in Tunisia reflect basically the political life that has been going on in the country for the past maybe 4 or 5 years. There is no one dominant party. If we look at the win of the Nahda party, it is not by a landslide, meaning that the next parliament that will be governing Tunisia will be fragmented or divided in one way or the other. I do not believe that it is some sort of a disappointment for the other political movements, because you still have the something like Qalb Tunis, or the Heart of Tunisia, which is a liberal stream, or you have other leftist streams. So Tunisia has always had a big landscape of political forces, but when it comes to sudden elections, when it comes to elections that have not been prepared for quite a long time, always the Islamists manage to gain the most out of it, manage to secure the biggest number of seats within the elections that they are running in. That's been in all the cases of the Arab Spring.
Dr. Akil, having such a great grasp on what is happening in that country, in your view, does the result reflect what Tunisians really want?
I believe it's too soon to tell. And we have to take into consideration what the Tunisian regime is like. It's some sort of a balance between the presidency and the parliament. So it depends really on the manner in which these two entities, these two parties, will sort of interact with each other. It does not necessarily reflect what all the Tunisians want, but it certainly reflects what a part of them wants. The participation rate was quite high, but again, it all boils down to the idea of how will the administration be run. It is not about who wins the elections, it's about who can use their winning in the elections to actually satisfy the Tunisian people.
Dr. Akel, how will the release of Tunisia's presidential candidate, Nabil Karoui, impact Sunday's second round of national elections?
Well, I believe that Tunisia, unlike a lot of cases in North Africa, Tunisia is one of the countries where the street and the physical presence in the political process is one of the very important things. And I believe that his release will be one of the factors that will aid him, because it will allow him to be physically present and at the same time to actually interact with the Tunisian public opinion, which is it has a lot of political awareness. Again, unlike a lot of other African countries, specifically Arab ones. So I think that his presence on the day of the elections, on the streets, maybe going from one election committee to the other, is one of the things that could help his chances and his luck in this round of the presidential elections.
Thank you so much, Dr. Akel. Always good hearing from you, Dr. Ziad Akel, who's political analyst and researcher at the Akram Center for Security and Strategic Studies in Cairo. Well, today marks World Mental Health Day. There's still much stigma associated with mental health. This day seeks to raise awareness about mental issues. According to the World Health Organization, mental health issues are becoming common across the globe. It's estimated that 1 out of every 4 people around the world suffers from mental disorders, while around 800,000 others commit suicide each year as a result of the mental disorders. Mental Health Day is observed every 10th of October. The theme this year focuses on suicide prevention. Well, to further analyze issues of mental health, we are now joined by Dr. Catherine Siengo Mutisia, a consultant psychiatrist at the Nairobi Mental Health Services, along with Eugene Wari, a journalist and mental health activist, are joining us here today. Thank you so much to you both for joining us. Doctor, I'm going to start with you, with the focus being suicide prevention this year, and that is the theme for this year. What is the situation on the African continent, and particularly here in Kenya?
Mm-hmm. We know that 79% of all suicide occur in the low and middle income countries. And so the rates in Africa are quite high. And we know that it's still a stigma. The stigma in Africa is still very high. And so we expect that suicide rates are more than what is reported, because we know in Kenya it's still a crime, that if you attempt suicide, it's a criminal offense and you can be arrested for it. So many people don't talk about it. Again, culturally, it's still seen as a taboo. So you find that loved ones who lose people to suicide, or who are family members who have attempted suicide, will not want to talk about it. So we are much far much higher rates, because we know for every suicidal attempt, at least 20 to 25 more have attempted suicide. Yes.
Those are pretty high numbers. Eugene, I'm going to bring you in because you feel very strongly about this. You speak a lot about it very, very openly. What is your experience with this been, and what would you like to see in terms of what Doctor is speaking about when it comes to that stigma?
First of all, unfortunately, I was thrown into this whole cause by my own personal issue. A while back, I was diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety. Since then, I went fully into the cause, along with getting my own help, of course. And the rates of suicides were unignorable, like, in this country. It was just too much. So I started my own support group. Where would I start? On my own contact list, or the people I know, people I haven't spoken to in over a year. That's how it grew, and over the years, it grew to a number that I can't barely handle today. So many organizations joined in, and we've been helping people. You know, I've been using my own number for a while as an emergency suicide hotline, which we get people, get them to get help, and we see where we can sort maybe the first few sessions, because it's no secret, getting help, medication for any mental health issues is not cheap. So it's an issue that's it's very prevalent in Kenya, and we cannot ignore it anymore. The worst part is depression. Such issues don't have a face. You can't tell who it is by just looking at them. The best you can do is identify symptoms. And where does it start? Talk to somebody, reach out to someone, because we know the numbers, we know the statistics, we know who places what in, who ranks where Kenya ranks, where the world ranks in the number of suicides. But what are we doing about it? We need to humanize the issue, because in the end, where you felt judged as a person, choose acceptance. When you felt rejected, choose compassion. Where you felt ashamed, we all know better. We need to be better as humans, because we know the numbers. But what are we doing about it?
Doctor, I'm going to come to you because on the back of what Eugene is saying, we're seeing not just in Kenya, not just on the African continent, worldwide, the numbers are increasing. You're talking about knowing the stats, the numbers are going up. Why do you think that is?
Obviously, there are various causes of which would make somebody think of ending their life. And we know that 90% depression and other mental health problems. And we know also lack of social support, where somebody feels they can open up to somebody who can give them support, also can contribute to higher rates. But overall, we encourage that we all can help one another. And that's why the theme of this year is take at least 40 seconds to try and listen to somebody who might be not feeling well, find out how they are feeling. Take at least 40 seconds, and we thank this TV because you've taken some time to talk about suicide prevention and mental health. And we are all in it together, and we can prevent suicide, because suicide is 100% preventable. Yes.
Well, Eugene, when you hear that suicide is 100% preventable, and yet we have these high numbers, where do you think the disconnect is from people hearing, well, you can come out and you can speak about what's going on with you, but not enough people are, because we still have these high suicide numbers?
When you go online today, the first hashtag you'll see, as Doctor has said, is 40 seconds of action. Why? Because according to the World Health Organization, is every 40 seconds a person commits suicide. Think about that. And out of 20 people, out of that one person who commits suicide, who actually takes their own life, 20 other people already tried and failed. In countries in the West, it's comfortable. It's easy to get help because they've opened to the idea of talking about it. Even in China themselves have recently enacted a mental health law, which actually helps people. In Africa, we are yet to come to the idea of even accepting it as a notion. The whole idea of having a backward law where you criminalize suicide, how does that help? Of course, it's very hard for even the World Health Organization in Kenya to get any stats, any surveys to be done, because most suicides are not reported for that very reason. So there are basically no statistics. The police in Kenya do not categorize successful suicides as they don't keep records of suicides. In fact, they put them aside as homicides or just murder on its own. So there is no way of getting actual records, which means the numbers may be higher. And looking at that number, this is a fight we're losing. It's a fight we can't afford to ignore anymore. Looking at the budgets for most countries in Africa. In Kenya alone, the national budget, what's allocated to the health sector is 15%. What goes from that 15% into mental health is 0.05%. Barely a drop in the ocean of what can help in a month, because there's no mental health facility, as in a stable one, the one that's there. When you talk to somebody in Africa about mental health, the first thing they jump to is a mental asylum. There's so many conditions, so many schizophrenia, addiction, anxiety, so many issues that people are not aware about. How many campaigns do we have to start and end before we actually reach to somebody on the ground? Because we want to start campaigns, oh, let's get the conversation out there, let's have a talk, let's keep the conversation on mental health awareness going. But nobody's willing to do the dirty work of reaching somebody, which is, again, coming back to the point of a personal responsibility. Mental health is not just some cause. It's a personal responsibility that you, Hannah, Dr. Catherine, should take. And ensuring that the person next to you is okay is something that should weigh you down each and every day.
Thank you so much to you both for joining us for that insight. We're going to move on to Nigeria now, where an estimated 30% of the country's 200 million people suffers from mental disorders. In spite of this disturbing statistic, there's a shortage of experts and centers to manage the situation. But in a bid to tackle the crisis, a mental health expert from Nigeria's North Central Plateau state has set up an organization to assist people facing mental health issues. Let's get more from CGTN's Kelechi M. Kalam.
An ongoing training session at Charis, one of the few facilities in Nigeria that offer mental health care services. The founder, Praise Horn, was inspired to set up the center in 2015 following a surge in mental health disorders. The organization provides a holistic approach that employs clinical psychological assessments, counseling, addiction management, support groups, as well as aftercare programs.
So people drop in here, to seek help over every and anything. Even if it's just basic advice that someone wants, needs to be able to navigate through life challenges. You can come in here and you will talk with someone who will be able to give you the right kind of advice, and then in case you have a psychological distress, it could be trauma related, it could be anything at all. It's one place that you can drop in, and then get the help that is needed.
So far, several have benefited from the services here. 31-year-old Aminu Musa is one of them. He was only 13 and involved in substance misuse, resulting in drug dependence. Now he volunteers at the facility as a counselor to help others.
Started from the little cigarettes, to a few drinks, and then it progressed into more sophisticated drugs like narcotics. So I struggled along that path for about 10 years until I came to a place where I realized that even my very existence was threatened by these drugs. I couldn't function, I couldn't be in school, I couldn't find stability in a social sense.
About 60 million of Nigeria's 200 million population have mental disorders. A WHO report shows there's a considerable neglect of mental health in Nigeria. The only available policy document in Nigeria dates back to 1991, with no revision or formal assessment conducted since its formulation. The few facilities available are disproportionate to the number of people who need treatment. Now experts like Praise are looking to key influencers to help create more awareness and inspire more people to make mental health services available. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, South Africa is another country struggling with mental health problems along with high suicide rates. Little has been done to address depression and other mental illnesses, as the country also lacks facilities and resources to help deal with people suffering from depression and anxiety. But a national helpline run by volunteers is trying to save lives, to end stigma and raise awareness on the impact of mental health problems on society. From Johannesburg, CGTN's Julie Shire brings us this report.
South Africa recorded the 4th highest suicide rate in southern Africa, and in the world it clusters at around number 50. The Psychological Society of South Africa is concerned by these figures.
South Africa probably falls within the top 10 countries in Africa at the moment for some of the highest levels of successful suicides. At the moment, for example, there are just under 10,000 psychologists who are registered with the Health Professions Council of South Africa. If you consider our population is now pushing towards 60 million. So I think that the levels of resources clearly need to be augmented in South Africa at the moment.
South African Depression and Anxiety Group has also revealed shocking statistics on the mental health state of the country's youth.
We are seeing, for the most part, that the suicide rates are getting younger and younger. I think it was last year we had the youngest suicide in the country, which was a 6-year-old. And thereafter, a month after that, there was a 9-year-old. It's becoming more and more common. And I feel like the awareness created around it is still not enough to have people access that help.
SADC operates the country's only suicide helpline. It has 22 lines and has received over 145,000 calls so far this year.
Get calls from all age groups. What I see with regards to the youth, one of the most things that prevail when they call in is the issue of unemployment, which causes their depression. Then we've got teenagers and people that are below that age who have got depression with regards to issues that are happening at home. Parents divorcing, peer pressure at school, and the pressure that they get from social media.
I'm a university counsellor, so I'm the counsellor for the dedicated university lines like UP, UCT, UWC and TUT. On average, maybe 10 calls a day from university students, and all their problems are university related. Students can call on the toll-free number, so it's a toll-free number for all students, and we try to contain and provide them with resources.
Fortunately, suicides are preventable, and raising awareness is key to helping break the stigma, and SADC's contact center has been indispensable to saving lives. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, we got to our top story for the hour, where at least 7 people have been killed and hundreds displaced following flooding in northeastern Tanzania. Authorities say they've evacuated residents to safe areas after the district of Korogwe was hit by torrential rains. Parts of Tanzania have witnessed heavy rainfall this year, causing massive flooding intermittently over the last few months. Well, we're now joined by CGTN's Isaac Lukando, who joins us from Dar es Salaam for an update on the story. Isaac, thank you so much for joining us. Reports indicate that at least 7 people have been killed in the floods. What is the latest?
Well, the reports that are doing rounds in the media, various media outlets are quoting numbers initially given by the police commander of the Tanga region where the deaths happened, and the media outlets are quoting anything from 5 to 7 deaths, and these are related to the rains that happened the day before yesterday, that started around 8 p.m. in the night all the way to yesterday, that was at around 3 p.m. And so those are the latest figures, but our efforts to try and find the Tanga regional police commander were proved futile. But a couple of hours ago we were trying to chase him down, and we've been told by his aides that he's actually in the field trying to further assess the situation.
Thank you so much for joining us there, Isaac, and giving us an update. Well, we're now going to take a short break and return. More news. Here's what you can expect. Global Fund meeting in France hopes to raise $14 billion to help fight global epidemics. And Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok is in Ethiopia to discuss border security and economic issues.
The newly upgraded CGTN website offers optimized coverage of China and international affairs, as well as distinct voices from around the globe. Be the first to know the biggest political news and discover the background to the major decisions. Decode China with a different perspective and get a better understanding of how China sees the world. Go beyond the news with sharp opinions on the events shaping today's world and reveal a China you have never seen before. Listen to entrepreneurs for in-depth analysis of the economy and touch the pulse of new technology via our hands-on videos. Travel back in time with CGTN to learn about China's past and immerse yourself in Chinese culture. To discover the stories behind Kung Fu. Get the latest news on Chinese lifestyle, including travel, sports, and nature. Regular productions including Ask China put high-ranking officials on the spot, while C-Lab presents new ways of storytelling via cutting-edge technologies, and Global Stringer delivers unique videos from China and beyond. Take a look at the world from a different angle. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Well, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis and Malaria has opened a drive in the French city of Lyon. The drive aims to raise $14 billion to fight these global epidemics. The fund says the money raised could save 16 million lives, avert 234 million infections, and place the world back on track to meet the UN objective of ending HIV and AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria within 10 years. French President Emmanuel Macron will chair the final day of the two-day meeting and is expected to meet with African heads of state. The meeting is the sixth to replenish the fund since it was set up in 2002, with prominent supporters including Microsoft founder Bill Gates and U2 lead singer Bono in attendance.
Well, we're approaching the moment of truth here in Lyon, with donor arms being twisted and nations making their pledges. The indications early this morning were that there could be concern that they were falling short. Remember, the Global Fund wants to raise $14 billion at this conference. And President Emmanuel Macron of host nation France adjusted his schedule to spend more time with donors, suggesting that there was still some way to go. In a very passionate speech to the conference a short while ago, Mr. Macron really set out the stakes, saying that the next 4 to 5 years really would decide the fate of this international effort to eradicate HIV, TB and malaria around the world. And he unusually put diplomatic pressure publicly on individual donor nations, among them Norway and Japan, calling on them to meet France's commitment of increasing funding for this by 15%. He also went as far as to say that nobody was going to be leaving Lyon unless and until the target was reached. There was a big round of applause and some laughter in the audience at that. Whether he's been successful with these strong-arm tactics will become apparent very shortly. Malcolm Brown, CGTN, Lyon.
Well, Sudan's Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok is today set to make a two-day official visit to Ethiopia, during which he will hold talks with his host Abiy Ahmed. The two leaders are expected to discuss border security as well as economic issues. The talks will be held in the capital Addis Ababa. The Ethiopian Prime Minister played a key role in Sudan's political transition, which ended months of a political crisis, paved the way for a political accord and a 3-year transition towards elections. TGTN's Giram Chala has more.
Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has arrived in Addis Ababa this morning. He came here at the invitation of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed for him, alongside presidents of Kenya, Uganda, Somalia, South Sudan and others, to attend the inauguration ceremony of the Ethiopian Palace renovation works, as well as the opening of the new Unity Park built within the premise of the palace. Hamdok, who was also the former Deputy Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, will hold a 2-day state visit to Ethiopia as well. the relationship between Sudan and Ethiopia is on its new heights after the latter's prime minister had played an instrumental role in helping the Sudanese side strike a peace deal and in return help them form a new government under Abdullah Hamdok's leadership. While here in Addis Ababa, the two prime ministers Abiy Ahmed and Abdullah Hamdok are expected to hold bilateral talks on issues of mutual interest, such as strengthening trade, people-to-people ties, and border security. This is the first time since his appointment as Sudan's head of state, Abdullah Hamdok is holding an official visit to Ethiopia. Grumtara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, let's head to Syria, where a Turkish offensive against Syrian Kurdish fighters has entered a second day. Ankara's incursion into the war-torn country aims to eliminate what President Tayyip Erdogan calls a terror corridor on Turkey's southern border. This comes after U.S. troops were withdrawn from the area, leaving the Syrian Kurdish YPG group vulnerable to Turkish attack. Turkey has branded the group a terrorist organization. Well, China has also voiced concern over the Turkish incursion in Syria. Beijing is urging Ankara to exercise restraint and is calling on all parties to respect Syria's sovereignty.
China has always believed that Syria's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity must be respected and upheld. We note that there are widespread concerns about the possible consequences of Turkey's military operations. We urge Turkey to exercise restraint. Recently, there has been some progress towards a political solution to the issue. All parties concerned in the international community should work together to create better conditions for this and avoid carrying out actions that could complicate the situation in Syria.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break. When we return, here's the business news making headlines. Top Chinese and U.S. trade officials meet in Washington for more negotiations on their 15-month trade war. And the IMF points out Nigeria's plan to increase sales tax as likely to drive up inflation. Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Well, top Chinese and U.S. trade officials are meeting in Washington for more negotiations on their 15-month trade war. Beijing has sent one of its largest ever delegations to the talks, led by Vice Premier Liu He. U.S. President Donald Trump earlier said, quote, "There is a really good chance to make a deal," end quote. CGTN's Jim Spellman reports from Washington.
The U.S. side will again be represented by U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. The Chinese delegation will be one of the largest yet, including the Minister of Commerce and Governor of China's Central Bank. The team is led once again by Vice Premier Liu He.
At the invitation of the United States, Vice Premier Liu He will hold the next round of high-level economic and trade consultations with the U.S. We hope that the U.S. can work together with China to meet each other halfway and promote progress in consultations on the basis of mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefit.
President Donald Trump has said he wants a comprehensive deal that would deal with everything from the U.S. trade deficit with China to Beijing's industrial policy. But the White House is leaving the door open to a limited agreement that may include China buying more U.S. agricultural products and the U.S. agreeing to some form of tariff relief. Even a limited trade agreement could provide an economic boost for both countries. A smaller deal would leave thornier issues on a separate track, but might help create a more positive mood going forward.
We are open to a number of ideas. Some may be short-term, some may be long-term. It's essential that the structural issues we've talked about, for 2 years since I've been around, the IP theft, the forced transfers of technology, the cyberspace hacking, the espionage, the trade tariffs and the non-tariff barriers, that stuff's got to get solved.
China has made significant agriculture purchases in recent weeks, and the White House views that as a good sign. Without some form of intervention from President Trump, U.S. tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese goods will go up from 25% to 30% on October 15th, less than a week from now. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Washington.
We move to Nigeria, where the government there is planning to increase sales tax to partly finance its record 2020 budget. The International Monetary Fund, however, warns that the move could drive up inflation. President Muhammadu Buhari presented a record $33.8 billion budget for 2020 to Parliament as he aims to spur growth at the start of his second term in office. The West African country is faced with the choice of boosting growth against a background of lower oil revenues or fixing its dilapidated road and rail networks. It also must pay off debt and fund the higher minimum wage. Inflation, which has fallen steadily since May, dropped to a 3.5-year low in August on lower food prices, increasing the chances of an interest rate cut. However, the central bank has kept rates tight to support the Nigerian currency. We move to South Africa's business confidence, which improved in September. Figures from the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry showed a strong bounce back in sentiment. The business confidence index came in at 92.4 points in September from 89.1 in August, which was the lowest level the index reached in 20 years. CGTN Sumitra Naidu reports from Johannesburg.
Business confidence recovered in September. It came as a welcome surprise after a dismal showing in August. The month-on-month recovery of 3.3 index points is similar to the figure seen in January 2018 after Cyril Ramaphosa was elected ANC president.
Although it's small, it's only about critical indices, gives us some idea of a more positive business climate. But it creates an opportunity actually where you can build on. And I think the medium-term budget that's coming up, that will be presented by the Minister of Finance, will be a critical element of where we're going and to convince private sector, foreign investors, which is also very important in terms of the South African economy.
7 of the sub-indices improved on the back of a firmer exchange rate, higher export volumes and an increase in new vehicle sales.
Then, of course, the JSE also had some more positive movements, but we're still not at a place where we would like to be. We saw core inflation, which is the underlying level of inflation in the economy, picked up a bit.
The bounce back is positive news, but the index is still 0.9 points lower than it was last year at this time. Big businesses are still feeling very nervous about the political landscape and the future of this economy.
Cas Kavadia from the Banking Association South Africa says government needs to restore confidence.
That shouldn't make us complacent, but at least it gives us some breathing space. Those state-owned enterprises that are not strategic but have the possibility of viability with restructuring and so on, let's restructure them, including looking at ways and means of including private capital into those state-owned enterprises, right, and private expertise. And then those that are not strategic and have absolutely no possibility of being viable, we've got to take the hard decisions of either selling those or working them down, and those are the discussions we need to have.
A ratings decision from Moody's is expected next month, while the agency suggested it may hold off on dropping South Africa to junk. It seems local and international investors will only get back to real business once that hurdle is crossed. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, South Africa's labor union AMCU is litigating against the second largest chrome producer in the world, Samancor Chrome, for profit shifting and fraud. The trade union says that members of the Samancor Black Employee Trust suffered as a result. Early in October, AMCU served and filed an application in the Johannesburg High Court. Angela Coppola has more.
Samancor has until the middle of October to respond to the application. The court application is focused on 4 alleged illicit foreign transactions valued at some $500 million.
This application, if it is opposed in a worst-case scenario, should be done within 9 months to 12 months. Thereafter, we want a trial. We want the court to exercise its discretion and to determine an appropriate remedy. And that could take a little while longer unless the matter is settled.
The Alternative Information and Development Centre says that there are some clues when looking at a business that may be involved in illicit financial transactions.
When you have offshore interests and a whole host of subsidiary companies, the only reason why you would have that is probably to take advantage of international tax laws to avoid paying taxes and wages.
AMCU has an interest in Samancor through its members in the Nzandani Workers' Trust, which indirectly owns around 5.6% of Samancor.
It's really easy for them to stifle these monies. So it's not about AMCO, it's about the workers who are always sidelined when come to share the spoils.
The case is based on an ex-Samancor board member turned whistleblower who brought over 1,000 documents to Richard Spoor Incorporated, who asked the AIDC to unpack the illicit transactions.
If the documents we have are solid, a sensible party will sit down and we'll try and resolve these things. I don't think this is in the company's interest, and I don't think it's in the shareholders' interest for the company to get involved in this dispute for a long time. It's the kind of thing that should be settled if there's any merit at all in what we're saying.
Many will tell you that tax evasion is a victimless crime. Well, that's not the case if you're in the mining community and you've suffered as a result of this alleged Samancor operation. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The state-owned Commercial Bank of Ethiopia has announced plans to support mega projects in South Sudan. Ethiopian officials, including the president of the bank, have met South Sudan's President Salva Kiir and discussed the bank's proposal as well as its future plans. Here's CGTN's Guram Chala with more.
Commercial Bank of Ethiopia is the most profitable bank in Ethiopia, with large network of branches and solid business across the country. The state-owned bank is now gearing up towards making huge financial proposition to the South Sudanese government and business people in the country. It seeks to support mega infrastructure projects such as roads and bridges. The bank's president Batagina, while meeting President Salva Kiir of South Sudan in Juba, said the bank will assist in increasing the low and underdeveloped infrastructure in the war-ravaged nation. President Salva Kiir, on his part, said the trade ties between Ethiopia and his country should also be strengthened through well-built road networks. He said especially the construction sector of South Sudan needs not only Ethiopia's expertise but also building material and finance too. Commercial Bank of Ethiopia is one of the most successful state-owned companies alongside Ethiopian Airlines and Ethio Telecom. After dominating the Ethiopian market, the bank is now seeking to spread its portfolio across Africa. Group Data CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, Samsung Display is set to invest $11 billion to upgrade a production line as it battles severe oversupply due to weak global demand for smartphones and TVs. The expenditure will be focused on converting one of the LCD lines into mass manufacture of more advanced quantum screens. The deal comes as South Korea's panel makers struggle to cope with liquid crystal display demand, rising competition from Chinese rivals, and a shift by major clients to organic light-emitting diode panels. South Korean President Moon Jae-in and Samsung Electronics Vice Chairman J.Y. Lee were in attendance at the signing ceremony of the proposed investment.
We will invest more than 13.1 trillion won into the next generation of large-scale display screens to create new jobs and fulfill my duty as an entrepreneur who gave his dreams and hopes to our young people.
Today's signing ceremony for new investment will be a starting point for making us a country of display screen manufacturing power that no one can beat, by independently producing key materials, components and equipment while maintaining the world's #1 display screen competitiveness.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break. Your sports news is coming up next. Here's what you can expect. Italy, eliminated after their Saturday Rugby World Cup game against New Zealand, is cancelled over Typhoon Hagibis.
Africa Live. Find your voice.